Everyone, welcome to this video. We'll talk how encryption impacts PCI DSS scope with our understanding on encryption and how it works. Now it says encryptions protect cardholder data by making it unreadable to authorized parties. The responsibility for encrypted data often depends on who holds the encryption keys as well as who can decrypt the data. But if a third-party service provider only stores encrypted data and cannot decrypt it, they might be able to exclude this data from PCI DSS scope, but they might also apply or implement certain control like access control or physical security controls, as we've mentioned earlier. And even in a situation where they are not decrypting the data, first they provide storage for or storage services for encrypted cardholder data, but does not have access to encryption or decryption key. PCI DSS impact, the encrypted data can be excluded from PCI DSS scope for the third party. However, third party must also have controls that we've mentioned, right? Access control or any other controls. For example, say the third party stores encrypted data provided by customer responsibility. The customer will also need to determine who can access the storage data, right? And that's why I said, if you've not done so, make sure you understand the differences between infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, as well as software, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, as well as software as a service. But for the third-party responsibility, they will also ensure physical and logical access controls and in place to restrict unauthorized access, as we mentioned. Take away both entities share responsibility for ensuring data protection. Then who control what? First, it says that determine access to encryption key and storage media. That's a customer, but the TSP ensure physical and storage security of storage, right? Physical and logical security of the storage. And then we have the annual review. The third-party provider access control should also be reviewed either as part of the customer PCI DSS assessment or by the third party itself with evidence provided to the customer. And that's why, again, we start talking of third-party vendor rates and what they do, because in as much as they said that they have those access control, physical controls, these are not just something that you want to assume, you also want to check to make sure that those controls are effective. Also, a third-party service receives encrypted data only for routing to other entities, but doesn't have access to the data or encryption key. How does it impact PCI DSS? The third-party provider may not have the PCI DSS responsibility for the encrypted data. The sending and receiving entities must apply PCI DSS control for data encryption. Do you see? So if they are involved, do you see encrypted data only for routing to other entities? And that's why you said that the sending and receiving entities must also comply with PCI DSS for data protection, as the third-party function is also similar to an untrusted network, right? Then take away responsibility as well as agree as to what they need to do. As we said, in case of anything, you should be able to set up clear agreements, guidance, or clear policy, who is doing what. So they should have that clear agreements between the third-party providers and the customers. Define folks' responsibility, who is doing what, who is in charge of encrypting, decrypting their data on, as well the different access control that we've talked. They also need to ensure compliance evidence is provided, reviewed regularly, right? So it's not just something that we'll assume maybe today, we're able to do them, everything looks good, and then we stay for the next 10 or 5 years to check. So that's something that we also want to review constantly to make sure that those controls are effective and operational. Always clarify PCI DSS responsibility and service requirement with your third-party vendors. Very, very important. And this literally explains everything that we've discussed so far. Also, the use of third-party service provider and PCI DSS compliant. When a third-party service provider is an external company that store, process, or transmit account data on behalf of a customer or manages in-scope system component, first, what happened? What is their role? They deal with data storage providers, payment processor, cloud service providers, as well as IT infrastructure management. But how does this affect the customer cardholder environment? First, the cardholder environment includes all systems that store, process, or transmit cardholder data. Impact of your third-party vendor is that this can impact the security of the customer cardholder environment because they may have access to cardholder data or control over system component. And in that situation, they also need to be in scope and make sure they stay in compliance with PCI DSS. So we cannot be talking about reducing condition here because they have access and they store or house that cardholder data, right? But what of the customer responsibility for PCI DSS compliance? First, using a PCI DSS compliant third-party service provider does not make the customer definitely. The fact that you're going with that third-party provider doesn't mean that it makes the customer automatically or by default also being compliant with PCI DSS. The customer remains responsible for ensuring compliance and even when outsourcing services. But why is this important? Because PCI DSS compliance is a shared responsibility between the customer and the third-party service provider. Customer must also ensure that the third-party service provider is meeting the PCI DSS requirement and confirm compliance as needed, right? Also, when the third-party service provider is storing cardholder data, customer uses a third-party provider to store cardholder data for backup purposes. The third-party service provider ensures its data storage environment is also in compliance with PCI DSS. But what of the customer responsibility? The customer must still ensure that the third-party service provider meets all PCI DSS requirements and must also validate compliance when it is necessary. Well, a typical example say third-party service provider is managing an IT system. Yeah, a customer outsources management of system components that are part of the cardholder data environment to a third-party service provider. Because the third-party service provider manages the IT infrastructure while the customer retains controls over sensitive cardholder, then let's see the different responsibility. What happens to the customer? Even if the third-party service provider is managing the IT infrastructure, the customer is also responsible for ensuring that all the system complies with PCI DSS. But wide use of a third-party service provider does not guarantee compliance. Because why am I going to be going with a third-party service provider, which it doesn't show that I am in compliance with PCI DSS? First, because PCI DSS compliance is the customer responsibility, and they must ensure that the third-party service compliance or third-party service provider is compliant with PCI DSS. You are the one bringing them. You are the one offering you services. You are the one paying your money. So at the end of the day, it's your data. If something happens, you are not telling your customers that you are outsourcing their data to a third-party service provider. And because of that, you also want to make sure that your data is better protected. So if you have to bring in a third-party service provider, then we'll go through the process of the third-party vendor risk analysis. We have to perform due diligence. We want to make sure that, those vendors have stringent security controls, everything, fully compliant before we can even entrust such vendor with our resources or services or data. Okay? And that's why I said, even if a customer uses PCI DSS compliant payment processor, they must still validate that the processor is as well following PCI DSS standard. Remember, we said, even when we talk about the software, that software can also go through the guideline. Everything might look good. But what if they are using default port? What if they are using default password? So it doesn't automatically make that particular application or software compliant with PCI DSS. Especially, you see, when it comes to security controls as well as access to cardholder data, right? Then, customer must confirm that the third-party service provider compliant with PCI DSS standards, ensure proper contracts and service agreements are in place that outline security requirements, provide services and data storage while maintaining PCI DSS compliance, ensure system meet the necessary standard for protecting cardholder data. But how customer can ensure that third-party service providers stay in compliance? In the course of doing so, do you see? We have said so much about third-party vendors. Conduct vendor risk assessment to evaluate that your third-party service provider controls are operational and effective. And this is an area where you can't really work as a third-party vendor risk analyst without you understanding all these other core regulatory frameworks. What if you work organization where your vendors, some may actually be sending you PCI DSS certification, SOC 2 certification, or this certification? What do you do from there? Right? And that's why it's important to have a core background or knowledge of all these other core regulatory frameworks before you can even think of working as a third-party vendor risk analyst. And that's a training that's going to come solid paid on our website. And it will be the last training after we've covered all the core regulatory frameworks. So another thing that they need to do is to review compliance reports. In the subsequent videos, we're going to cover that shortly. You review compliance reports such as the PCI DSS Security Self-Assessment Report or the point of the report of, I just forgot that, ROC, report of compliance, right, from your third-party service provider. They also need to establish contracts that clearly outline their security responsibility. So each time you're going with third-party vendors or your vendors, contract negotiation is something that you want to be able to make sure all aspects of things are being documented, proper contracts, right? And apart from that, in as much as they might also say compliance, but you see this perform regular audits. And that's the one thing that, as I said, we'll always have jobs because we need to time and again perform audits all the time to verify ongoing compliance with PCI DSS standards. Right? So customer and tips for PCI DSS compliance. We have customer responsibility, confirm PCI DSS compliance, review contracts, ensure compliance through audits. And then for third parties, service provider responsibility, you follow PCI DSS standards, you maintain secure standard storage processes systems, and then you also provide compliance with documentation. All right. So, but what is our takeaway? Customer must actively manage their third-party relationship and ensure all third-party service providers comply with PCI DSS. Even when using PCI DSS compliance service providers, customers remain responsible for securing their cardholder data and confirming compliance. So we've covered a lot about the shared responsibility, and it's a big thing, right? And you, as someone, assessor or GRC analyst, helping your organizations. So these are some of the things that you need to understand, like the shared responsibilities. What are you all supposed to do, and what your customer is supposed to do to ensure that not only staying in compliance with PCI DSS, but to be able to protect your customer trust, which is their data. So in the next video, we will talk of using third-party vendor risk requirement 12.8 and see what it actually meant. I don't want to make, I'm trying to, I don't want the video to be so long. So I will see you guys in the next video. I will take it from there. And do not forget to like, subscribe, share, laugh at videos. I'll see you on the next slide. Okay.